Welcome to the Employee Experience Conversation. In this conversation, I sit down with Kim England, who's VP of Digital Employee Experience and Community at Pearson. And we talk about the changing role of community in the workplace and also look at how community can drive AI adoption and AI empowerment in your workforce. Let's get into it. Welcome to the EX Conversation. I actually spoke to someone the other week and they called it the X Conversation. Please, we are not talking about your exes. We're talking about employee experience.
Or Twitter.
Yeah. Or Twitter, yeah. Oh my God, yeah, I didn't even think about that. So really, we get to dive into your career, a bit of your thoughts and feelings on employee experience. And I've got some quick fire questions as well. Kim, you've had quite an interesting career when it comes to employee experience. Was it actually something that you wanted to do when you were younger?
No, I wanted to be a horse riding instructor.
Oh, so very different.
But I realised that there wasn't an awful lot of money in that. So I wasn't sure I was going to be able to pay the bills. So that it wasn't necessarily my dream, but I did do a communications degree. And the reason I picked the communications degree is because they had an opportunity for a year to go to Australia. So really, I took the degree more out of my interest in travel than actually in communications. And the weird thing about the degree is it did nothing, there was nothing in the curriculum that was related to the kind of communications job that I do. It was a lot of psychology, linguistics, a little bit of media. I didn't end up going to Australia. So it's a little bit sad because I got a boyfriend, unfortunately, and I didn't want to leave
So
him.
this is the X Conversation.
It is the X Conversation. However, I think what was really interesting about the degree was it gave me quite a good insight into video editing. And actually, for my dissertation, I made a video, and that was what I submitted instead of like thousands and thousands of words in a dissertation. And I had to build a website. And so back then it was like, there was no AI fix for a website. You had to, do hard coding. So, there were some good skills that I picked up in that degree, but it didn't prepare me for the world of work. And it certainly didn't sort of open up any doors in terms of what employee communications or employee experience might be. I kind of fell into that. So I got a job at BP. I was a team assistant. So I was kind of running around an office in Milton Keynes, supporting lots of different executives, arranging lots of parties and events, which was a lot of fun. And then I ended up doing a charity project. And in that charity project, I made a video of what we did. So we basically kind of did like a makeover of a garden. So I was able to use my degree skills. And then I got an opportunity to move to the BP office in London. And that's when I started to meet some of the internal communication professionals. And I did the black belt, the Melkram black belt in communication. So those people who are listening who've been around a while will remember that you actually get a black belt, which was pretty cool. And that's when I really started to understand what internal communications was all about. I moved from BP to Pearson. So I took on an employee communications role at Pearson. And then the employee experience really found me. So we were looking at sort of bringing all of our intranets across the globe together. So we were at the time Financial Times, Penguin, and the education business. And that's when Enterprise 2.0 was around. And as a stakeholder, I was invited to a meeting and I was like, this is really cool. I would love to be a part of this. And they were looking for a community manager. And I took the job. I was like, this is, kind of really something I was very interested in. And that was maybe 15 years ago. So we launched Jive, which was our sort of first enterprise social network. We called it Neo. And through that role, I really then sort of started to network with a really interesting community of people who were very much focused on the kind of employee experience. And then, over sort of time, we've evolved, what Pearson does in terms of employee experience. We left Jive coming up 4 or 5 years ago and moved to Unily. And, the rest is history.
Yes. I remember being part of the pitch process to Pearson with Lauren at one point. And I was like, I got off that call and I chatted to Lauren. I was like, do you know what? I feel like this is like a match made in heaven. Like, sometimes when you speak to people and you're like, okay, we're vibing.
100%. And I think that was actually a really important part of the vendor we wanted to select, because back when Jive launched, it was a real community. So it wasn't just that you purchased the product and you implemented it. So much of how they built the product and evolved the product was by including their customers. And, we really evolved the product together. And I think it was a real shame that when Jive was bought out by Oria, we lost that sort of sense of community. However, some of the people who, I still interact with on LinkedIn, the people that, I would come to call friends, were made through that community. They're amazing sort of annual events that they used to have. And actually what was really interesting and what I loved about coming to this part of communications, the employee experience, is it's a really warm, supportive community. People aren't afraid to share what they're up to. They're very collaborative. You can put a post on LinkedIn and ask for help, and people really dive in and support. And so, we found that again with Unily, and the Unily customers, are some of the most amazing people in the space. And really value the opportunity that we have to build those relationships.
Yeah, obviously I'm biased, but I love the Unity community too. Let's talk a little bit about the community itself, because I think it's something that at Pearson you had like a different relationship with over the years. I know it's in your job title now, but tell me a little bit about like how Pearson's journey with community has evolved over time.
Yeah, so I think, one of the most exciting moments that I had when it came to community was when we first launched Neo. And what we did was we basically just gave everyone access, but people didn't really know they had access. And so we kind of had these early adopters, and sort of people started to come in, and they were really just trying to play with it. And you have to remember, this was also at the time when like Facebook was new, Twitter was new. And so a lot of people didn't really know, how am I supposed to use this platform for work? And one of the challenges we had at Pearson is we're a very huge company at the time, because we obviously had like the FT, Penguin and education, and we weren't really able to sort of see, how people could collaborate or share information. And there was a gentleman called Sam Lee, and he was based in Korea, and he put a post up. It was literally like a sort of 90-second video, and it was to our CEO at the time, Marjorie Scardino. And he asked her 3 questions. One was like a business related question. And one was, about her vision for the future. And the third question was, where were her glasses from? Because she always had like, amazing glasses. And he posted it, and everybody just started commenting on it. I'm, messaging from Brazil. I'm messaging from, a state in the US. Challenge with our CEO was she was actually away that week at her daughter's wedding. So there was a little bit of delay in terms of Marjorie getting back to him, but she did. And when she did, all those people who had commented, saw the notification that Marjorie had posted. And suddenly we'd just sort of seen this ripple run right the way sort of round the world, if you like. And it was at that moment I was like, this is something really, really special, because it didn't matter which office we were in, whether we were remote, whether we were, physically in an office. It didn't matter what level in the organization we were. We were all connected and united in the excitement as to whether, our CEO was going to post back to Sam. And so in that moment, I really saw the power of what employee experience can do when you sort of bring community and social together. And so that was a real moment. But we've had ups and downs. It hasn't all been, wonderful posts that have whizzed around the world. I think we saw a real surge in how people could use the platform for good. But at the same time, I think as we sort of started to see social media not have such positive vibes, shall we say, externally, we were sort of seeing a little bit of that tension internally. And actually what we also heard from our employees is that they were just really overwhelmed. And as our community kind of grew, it was really difficult to do the pruning, to clean up, right? And so we reached a point where it was like, do you know what? We can really invest a lot of time trying to clean this thing up, or we kind of just set fire to it and let it go and move to a different platform. And that's what we did with Unily. But also at the time, we really needed to refocus our employees. We had changed as a company. And what we didn't want is some of the louder voices, which were not always accurate in terms of the direction of travel of Pearson, to be the voices that, were most prominent on the platform. So we took a decision to turn off social. And, for me, I'd just spent 10 years building up this wonderful community and I'd seen so much value in it. It was a little bit crushing.
Was it actually off overnight?
Well, literally when we turned Unily
Yeah.
on and Neo off, there was no
No migration or anything like that. Yeah.
no. And it was a very kind of top-down platform, which, when we'd been so used to kind of the bubbling up, the grassroots, it was a real shift. But we were responding to what our employees also did need, which was they were like, just tell me what I need to know. I don't want to have to go through all the comments and, 5 posts on this topic that people have got opinions on. Like, I just really need to know what I need to know, right? So it was the right thing to do at the time. And, we called it the pendulum swing. It was almost like we needed to swing so far one way to then be able to kind of adjust. And that's what we've been doing over the last 18 months. So we've reintroduced social. We're in the process of launching communities. So that's the new feature that you guys have just launched. We've got it in our staging environment, and we're building out. We're calling them professional communities because there's a bigger focus on learning than just anyone can have a community. And the biggest shift as well that we've kind of evolved in terms of kind of how our platform works is governance. So, anyone who's heard me speak at Unite will know that I've talked at length about governance. And I think that's a really important step that, in our excitement to launch Neo, we were like, anything goes, anyone can post, which was great until it wasn't.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, so actually there's one interesting thing that I've noticed kind of as you've spoken is there was the kind of step change between communication and employee experience. I know your kind of communication was your bread and butter. How did that change happen? Was it like do you think it's to do with like societal changes around employee experience, or is it something that's like personal to you, or how did that change happen?
Yeah, so I think the change really for me was that I kind of went where my energy went. I'm, one of the questions that you said you were going to ask me is, what's, the key skill?
Yeah.
My number one skill, if I look at Strength Finders, is woo.
Yeah.
And the thing about that is woo is all about, wanting to meet new people and win them over. And I think the reason I ended up in employee experience is because as much as I love the discipline of internal communications, I don't get excited about putting a communication plan together. I don't get excited about, ghostwriting for leaders or all of that kind of sort of very, what we call, the sort of core of internal communications. What I get out of bed in the morning for and what gets me excited is how I can bring people together to create, magic because we're collaborating, or I'm bringing 2 people who have got a very similar idea together. Or, when we had Neo, we would bring people who were doing very similar things, especially when it came to like digital products. We'd be like, Kate, you 2 are doing something really similar. You should talk. Then you get a product out to market quicker. Like, I love being that sort of connective tissue. And so I think the reason I've kind of fallen more into the employee experience side of the communications discipline is because that's what I get to do. And sometimes that's to do with the technology, so you pick the right vendor and you pick the right tools and you bring that to life for people. But more often than not, it's really about connecting people, seeing what business problem there is to solve, and then figuring out how you can use some of these technologies to solve some of those business problems.
You use the word the term connective tissue, which I really like. It's something that is sometimes an afterthought with employee experience because people talk about this terminology of employee experience, but actually when you start to tear apart what that means, it's things supported by maybe departments or structures that don't work well together, technology that doesn't work well together. How have you actually gone about trying to connect the tissue in the organization at Pearson when it comes to employee experience?
Yeah, so I will say that I think Pearson has been really sensible in terms of its choice of technology. When I talk to some of my other peers in this space, a lot of companies, they sort of try everything. They have almost like every tool going. I know that there was, companies that would have had Jive, but they also had Yammer switched on. They had they're in the Microsoft suite and they're building out SharePoint, but then they have another tool for, sending out email. Like, I just think there's a bit of a sweet shop in terms of all the tools in employee experience. And so I think what Pearson has done is really tried to limit the number of tools we had. When we launched Jive, for example, it wasn't it was the social intranet, it was the enterprise social network, it was all things. And, sometimes it wasn't always the best tool for all the things that we wanted to do, but we made it work because what we didn't want is another tool. And I think, that's one of the things that I've, had probably the most conversations about at Pearson and tried to influence, when people will come to us and be like, oh, it'd be really amazing if we can have this tool where we can, do ideation. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But how are you going to get people to that tool? Because half the battle is you've got to let people know that there is a tool, then you've got to, get them into the tool, and then you've got to get them to keep coming back to the tool. And more often than not, what I see is that these tools fall down because there's a massive launch, everyone gets really excited, but actually sustaining these tools is really, really difficult. So what we've done at Pearson is just try to keep it simple. It's not a diss on Unily, but an example would be Kudos, right? Kudos is not as good as Achievers, which is a company that does, Kudos and badging and points and all the rest of it. It's relatively basic in comparison to that, but it's within the platform. And so, where possible, okay, you guys make a better job at like what the actual platform is all about, but you kind of put that add-on on. It's the same with ideation. It's not as good as some of these ideation modules that you can go, or tools that you can go and buy, but it's in the platform. And what I'm sort of trying to kind of influence within the organization is if we can do more things in one platform, then that's better for our employees, because then they're not like, okay, which platform am I supposed to go to? And we've got, I don't know how many minutes we've been talking, but I haven't mentioned AI yet.
Yeah.
And I think we're sort of starting to see that happen with AI. So everybody wants to create agents, which is brilliant. But now as an employee, I'm like, okay, so which agent am I supposed to go to answer the question? Now, the agent's got all the questions wrapped up. It's going to talk to me. It's brilliant. But now there's like a proliferation of agents. And so, I think it's in our nature to get excited about shiny new tools. And, lots of companies will say, we've got the answers to all your problems. But actually, I think sometimes by having lots and lots of tools, you bring lots and lots of problems to your organization in terms of the employee experience.
Yeah, sometimes it's almost like we've maybe just shifted the problem from like app sprawl to agent sprawl in a way. But you raise a really good point. Yeah, you raise a really good point around the experience. And I was speaking to our Lockdeep, our CEO, yesterday, and he was reiterating the point to me around like, it's not about being best of breed technology for everything within that stack, right? It's about, can you provide the right experience and the right digital front door for employees to get there, find the information, but also action some of it. And so absolutely, it's like integrating into there are some really great suites there are some really great pieces of tech out there doing really great things in employee experience, but like, are they brought into the right place, and can people like use them and adopt them to get the value out of them? So, you brought up AI. I challenge you. So the door is open. So I kind of asked you to bring a topic that you really wanted to speak about, that you're impassioned about, that you think is something that is a real opportunity within employee experience. What is that topic?
It's AI, obviously. I think in your brief, you also said opportunity or challenge.
Yeah.
And I think when I think about AI, I think about it from both of those perspectives. I think there's a lot of challenges with AI. We've just talked about the proliferation of agents. What I'm also seeing, just anecdotally from talking to our own employees, is that there are people being left behind, right? So there are people who are being left out of the conversation for a number of reasons. One, some people really don't want to use AI, right? They are making a specific stand about kind of, the environmental impact and sort of the issues that they concern themselves around privacy and all those sorts of things. There are people who it feels very inaccessible in terms of the language that people are using, lots of acronyms. You know, sometimes when we're listening to leaders and they're talking about AI, it feels like it's very advanced and like, you know, I'm just overwhelmed in terms of, okay, what's my entry point? And then, you know, people are also, you know, not necessarily finding the time to be able to upskill and really invest in their own learning for AI, right? It's kind of like an add-on. And I think what we're hearing from people is like, you know, you can't afford not to learn AI. That's great. But, you know, there's only 24 hours in a day. And, you know, as much as I would love to invest in AI, have I got time? And, you know, the challenge is that actually, if you do invest that little bit of time, suddenly you can, you know, find some time savings with some of the AI. Not always, and that's the other challenge, right? Like, you know, I've done some experiments with AI, and sometimes I'm like, geez, I could have just done this myself without using AI. It'd have been a lot quicker. You know, we've got challenges with things like hallucinations. I had an interesting experiment with my friends. We went away a couple of weekends ago and we'd taken a photo, and one of my friends put it through like a AI image thing and said, like, make it look softer and, you know, put a prompt together. And it added in a person. So there was a slight gap between us.
Softer, yeah.
It was just like it was so strange because no one had noticed it until like we were sort of, you know, few messages in, and then we were like, hang on a minute, who's that person? It's like sat with us. It was just so bizarre, and it like changed the clothes. So, you know, I know that it does crazy things like that, but at the same time also, you know, even with data, it can be challenging that like it won't pick up all the data you want, and you kind of have to check and balance and things and so on. So, you know, I think, as I say, I think it's inaccessible in terms of the language that we're using. I think people are not necessarily finding time to upgrade their skills. And, you know, there is obviously people who, you know, for ethical reasons do not want to use it. So that is the challenge. I think the opportunity, though, certainly for employee experience people, is we are in the middle of it, right? We can really influence and support and bring employees along on that AI journey. And at Pearson, what we've recently done is we went for like a Gen AI page on Unily, on our Unily platform's called The Hub, and we threw everything, you know, on the page, and here's the training, and here's this, and here's the tools you can use. And what we realized very quickly is like that is too much, and it's very, very overwhelming. And so we talked to our employees, and actually what we've done in partnership with the learning team, because we have a you know a whole focus around the career architecture and having different levels within the skills that people need to build. We've essentially created like a beginner learning pathway, an intermediate, and an advanced, and then we've set up the page based on what people need to know at each of those levels, right? So we're talking the language of a beginner. Where do you start? Let's hold your hand a little bit. No question is a stupid question. All of those kind of things, just to build people's capability and skills in a gentle, experimental, you can't make mistakes, we're going to support you way. But at the same time, we know there's a lot of people who have already moved, you know, sort of into more of that intermediate and advanced space, and they don't want the beginner content, right? So we've got, you know, very specific content that's going to support them. And so by doing that, what we've done is we basically said, here's the three learning pathways, but for each of you, we're going to give you some specific information. So every single group needs to know about ethical AI and responsible use, right? So the policies, how to keep yourself safe, how to keep the company safe. Then it's, you know, what learning is available for you. Then it's how do you stay up to date with information? And then finally, how do I move to the next level? Mm-hmm. And so that's where, you know, I've been involved in that conversation. I've got some amazing colleagues at Pearson who have been really doing some great stuff with AI. Because they're so in, you know, the midst of it, it was quite helpful for me from a kind of outsider point of view to come in and go, okay, this is all great. What if we just made a few tweaks? And you know, I think it's been really successful over the last sort of 3 months at really helping our employees be met where they are right now on AI. If you're not having those sorts of conversations within your organizations, get in those conversations, because that is where we can really help our employees and their overall experience. And whether you like it or not, AI isn't going anywhere right now. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, this is very similar to what we were doing with Enterprise 2.0 10, 15 years ago, right? Like it came at us at speed, and it didn't go away.
Yeah. So obviously Pearson's in the business of learning and education. Is there a higher standard there when it comes to delivery, and how are you thinking about it outside of those learning pathways to ensure that, like, outside of that, there's more innovation to come when it comes to AI?
We are a learning company, so the fact that we are creating, a really great learning experience for our employees, I think, we do set a higher standard. But I think the other point that I would make is that, we just launched some thought leadership. It's called Mind the Learning Gap. It's all about how people are being left behind in terms of AI upskilling, and, how you can kind of plug that gap. And I think, it would be pretty remiss of us if we were going out to the world and saying, hey, you know what, we've got this great thought leadership, but we weren't actually drinking the Kool-Aid, if you like, internally. But actually, I would say that whilst the learning pathways are great, and I think it's really, really important, and it's certainly foundational, I think it's the culture of experimentation, of permission, that's actually probably more important. And that's where I think, we have Omar Abosh. He's been at Pearson a couple of years now. He's really, really opened the floodgates to say to people, we really want you to test things. We want you to try stuff out, experiment. On a recent call, he was like, I want everyone vibe coding. Going back to my point earlier, some people might say, well, I don't even know what vibe coding is. And so, I take his message and I go, okay, that's great, because he knows what vibe coding is, right? And, so do a lot of the senior leaders and certainly the people in the AI team. But the average employee, certainly a frontline worker, might not know what vibe coding is. And so for me, that's where, again, I think we have the opportunity to then unpack that a little bit. And, I use the example of, I took my son into Pearson offices a couple of weeks ago for Take Your Child to Work Day. I didn't know what vibe coding is a little bit, but I hadn't actually played with any of this stuff. Anyway, I took Bilbo into the labs team. We just had an hour with them. They had him doing prompts, and there was big images that he created of a football match and a heist, because he loves GTA.
Yes.
And was having a great time. And then they started asking him some questions about, if you could build an app, what would you build? And literally he was like, oh, I want to do this fitness app for the family so we can compete against each other. And sitting there, they built it, vibe coding, literally. And he was eyes wide open, super excited. So I was like, oh my God, you did that while we were sat there. So when we got home over the weekend, I downloaded a vibe coding app, Lovable, and then I started playing around with him, and we literally built the app together. It was super, super simple. And so to me, what we need to do with our employees is talk about that example, that story, give people a little bit of a sort of incentive to play around in something maybe less work related, something that they're more interested in, to then help them move to, okay, well then how would you apply this in your work? And we did that when we launched Enterprise 2.0. I let people come in and talk about travel and cats and dogs, and there was a word association, because what that did was it built people's confidence. And then they were like, oh, we could totally use this for, insert business problem you're trying to solve for. So I think that is the other sort of side of the opportunity in employee experience, is we can humanize some of this AI conversation. But I think also what we have an opportunity to do is really tell great stories. And so, that's what I'm sort of excited about next in terms of where the AI stuff goes, and also building weird and wacky apps.
On your yeah. It seems like permission to experiment is central to the culture of Pearson. What's the coolest thing you've maybe seen the Pearson employee do with AI so far?
That's a tough. Actually, no, it's not a tough question. So we have, as I said, we've got the Mind the Learning Gap thought leadership that went out. We launched it at World Economic Forum. So one of the team sent me, he'd created a agent that basically took all the information that's on the site. And one of the things that we've launched is this deep framework. So it's really just kind of understanding how you can learn and develop your skills. And what he'd developed is the ability to take your LinkedIn profile. So I didn't know this, but you can go to your LinkedIn profile and you can like save it as a PDF. And then you basically upload it into this agent, and then it will tell you kind of where you need to focus in terms of updating your skills, and it sort of kind of feeds you back this profile. Now, what was really interesting, it was very spot on, but it also made me realize I needed to update my LinkedIn profile because there was like loads of stuff that was like pretty outdated. That was really cool because it was, taking, a piece of thought leadership that we've got. It's taking LinkedIn, which, we all use it every day, mashed them together, and then it gave me something that I could be like, oh, okay, this is actually some, really interesting insights for me to think about my own personal development and where I might want to focus my skills based on the job that I do, not just based on, we all need to learn AI, right?
Yeah.
So I will happily share the link details, and maybe be interesting to see what it says to you. But, that was just somebody thinking, I'm going to just build an experiment. And so we can have some discussions internally about, how we might use that. Do we want to put it on the Thought Leadership website and people can try it out? But, it's just things that people are like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if, there's so much of that's happening. So yeah, that's probably the most recent example.
Definitely send me the link because I love stuff like that. Anything like a test or a personality profile.
It is a bit like doing a test.
Yeah.
So as I say though, it made me realise that God, I need to freshen up my LinkedIn. There's a lot of old content.
I probably need to do the same. That's actually a nice segue into our more chill, quick fire round. So I've got some like quick fire questions to get to know you better, although I probably know you very well already. But for our audience, so are you a power nap or a power through person?
Through.
Nice, me too. I've answered that every time. Obviously, my answer doesn't change, but I can't do a power nap, but I can do a disco nap.
Oh, I could do a disco nap too.
It's a different type of nap.
Power through, although if I power through for long enough, there will be a point where I probably do need the disco nap.
Yeah. It's all just from the other side. Yeah. So gut instinct or data driven?
I would say I am definitely gut instinct. I do think data is important, but I go with my feelings.
Oh, I feel like your Unity customer success manager would have said data data driven for you, but
probably because I give Unity a hard time about analytics. It's more important, but do you know what the thing is about data? And I did give this some thought. I think, probably most people who are listening to this will agree that the analytics across the board, not like it's not a slight on Unity, it's across all of the kind of platforms that we use, are not brilliant. So as much as we want the data because we want to make data-driven decisions, I think the facts are most of us do make a lot of our decisions based on gut.
Yeah. I think even Unity Chief People Officer, when I had her on, also agreed with that. She was like, sometimes you've got to get the data to like prove what you know is right to communicate it upwards, but like trust your gut.
Yeah, and then even when I look at data, like just before we started this recording, I was looking at my analytics as I do every morning, and I will look at the patterns and I will have a gut feel about why the pattern is that way, and then I go and prove it. But I would agree that the data is confirming what my gut has already told me.
Cool. And then in office or homework?
Homework.
Yeah, cool.
I work at home, so
decorate.
But I do love going into the office. I just don't want to do it all the time.
Yeah. Okay, so what's one piece of advice you wish you'd known at the start of your career?
Oh, so I would say that it is not a weakness to ask for help.
Yeah.
So I think when I was a very early internal communications manager and then moved into enterprise social network, I felt like I had a point to prove and that I could do it all. And, probably when I was younger, I was a lot more capable of doing it all. But I think, having children makes it a little bit more difficult. And actually, there's no prizes for doing it all by yourself. And as somebody who loves collaborating, I wish I had been, more confident to reach out to more people to get support, certainly in the areas that I'm not as strong. And so finding allies who can help me. So yeah, it's definitely something I've learned now, but I wish I'd learnt it sooner.
Yeah, sometimes I'm guilty of it as well. Sometimes you just have like swallow your pride and be like, okay, like I can ask for help. We have this. Oh, actually, there's a question from Hattie Rosh, who I think we met before, one of our previous guests. So we have this kind of tradition where we have a question for the next guest from the previous guest. And she asked, what's something that you're doing to simplify something for your employees or simplify the workday for your employees?
Well, hopefully it's going to be Unity glass. So that's my holy grail right now that I am really hoping is going to simplify. But actually, aside from that, I would say that this week I was on a smart brevity training. We had brevity, and I've got, in fact, it's literally here. I have the book. And I would say, you know, we've looked at smart brevity before. In fact, it was one of the sort of key focuses when we launched Unilu. We were like, and it's one of those things where sometimes you can get a bit lax with it and you can get back into the habit of, like, you know, writing way more words than you need to. So I would say it's really reigniting that kind of lens when we're thinking about communications. It was a great training. If you're not familiar with smart brevity, definitely go and look at some of their resources. But that is one of the things, you know, people haven't got a lot of time, make every word count. And I think your employees will thank you for it.
I went to a lunch and I was sitting next to two people. One was very pro smart brevity. The other one was very anti smart brevity. Both communicators. But it's one of those things that, I mean, there's so much communication. I'm here for like the efficiency of it. But the kind of counter argument is that some people say it maybe comes across a bit transactional. So especially when you've got people that like know and love to write certain ways and like articulate the story, it kind of gets in the way of that.
Yeah, although what I would say from the training that we had is, so the exercise that we went through is we took one of our like media announcements, and basically we were in 3 different groups and we applied the smart brevity sort of principles, and all of us came up with a slightly different version of the press release. All of them valid in their own right, but all of them better than the original. So I guess my pushback would be that you know, there's no wrong answer with smart brevity. I think it's still you know, you sort of apply it in terms of how it might sort of feel for you. But the fact is, all 3 of them were better than the original when we write the principles. And so, you know, I think what I took away from it is that need to be respectful of people's time. And as much as, you know, you might like writing in a certain style and stuff, like, are you writing for yourself or are you writing for the reader? And that was the first thing that they kind of focused on the training is, who are you writing this for? And I think that's a really important point, because if you're writing it for somebody who's really not got an awful lot of time and just wants to get the hard facts, then yeah, it might have to be a bit transactional. But if you're trying to make it sound like this, then you're writing for yourself a little bit. And, you know, I would argue if you really love that kind of writing, then go do that in your spare time and on LinkedIn, and that's wonderful. But your employees haven't got the time necessarily, right? So they need to get to... Or the other thing that they kind of make the point on smart brevity as well is, like, it doesn't mean you don't have all that information. It's just not up top. And I, you know, for years have always kind of taken the whole like newspaper view, the headline, you know, the stuff you need to know. And then for those people who want the context and they want all the detail, because there are lots of people who that's important for, you put that kind of, but you don't bury the lead, right?
I feel like I had a smart brevity 101 there. That's quite helpful for me. So thank you. It's not in replacement of the training course, obviously, but it was a good start for 10 for me.
Or get the book.
Get the book. Yeah, I have actually read parts of the book. And my final question for me is, I have this like concept of the employee experience room 101, which is like, what one thing from the workplace do you think we should put in the trash?
So I'm going to be controversial here. And, you know, my previous answer to working from home, I am going to put return to office mandates in the bin. And the reason I'm going to put them in the bin is because I think the message that is lost in the whole return to work mandate is everyone keeps talking about, oh, you need to be in the office, you need to be in the office. I come into this office, day in, day out, and I speak to people who are all over the globe. So if I was mandated into the office, I wouldn't necessarily be interacting with the people that I work with day in, day out. Next week, I'm off to New York and I'm going to be with the marketing communications leadership team. And it's going to be the most awesome week to be with those people in person, getting a lot of really important work done. And I value that time. But I don't think return to work mandates are serving employee experience. I think they're serving leaders who feel that, if they've got everybody in the office, they can justify the cost of the building and they can justify, I think what is a kind of very outdated way of thinking about work. Totally appreciate though, if you are in a very collaborative role and you need people to be together, that's great. But to me, flexible working makes more sense. Like, okay, we're on a project for the next 3 months. So do you know what? I think we should all be in the office at least 3 days a week for the next 3 months to get this project moving forward. Great. But mandating people to be in 9 to 5, 5 days a week, whatever. Yes, get in the bin.
Yes, I totally agree. It's the intent. It's being intentional about the type of work and the outcome that's required and where people are. I think we also, our marketing collaboration thing is next week as well, so we're synced on that. But our US colleagues are over, and we have 3 intense days in where we do collaborative type work, coming up with certain strategy and new marketing initiatives, and that's great. But actioning some of that, my manager is in New York. The person that I work with on lots of other projects in Miami. It's just sometimes the reality of it is, I actually do love being in the office because I quite like the people around me, the attention. But
the thing is, there's just so much noise at the minute. And some of the stuff that I hear, graduates, they aren't getting the opportunity to learn from people. I'm sorry, that's lazy. I mentor people. I mentored she was an apprenticeship degree employee. So Pearson has apprenticeship degrees. I mentored her all through COVID, right? So she wasn't coming into the office. I wasn't coming into the office. No one was coming into the office. And, I invested a lot of time talking to her, helping her, supporting her. So you can do it. And I think, we can all be lazy. I think making people go into the office is also lazy. It doesn't mean people are going in and being effective. It doesn't mean they're mentoring and supporting people. It just means that they're showing up and their badge gets logged in the system that they were in the office. So, I think flexibility is the right way. And I think, this is my mantra for work: treat people like adults. And if you treat them like adults and you respectfully, ask them to work in the way that is right for the business. So this isn't also about just doing what's right for people. Then people will do the right thing. But I think when you start treating them like children and it's we all have to be in, you have to be in at the same time, people rebel against that anyway. And don't tell me that people have been super productive in the office, because I don't buy it.
I go for 3 coffees. Yeah.
I get an awful lot of work done when I am in the office because I'm not in the office so much. And I'm okay with that, because what I do is I make sure I've got meetings with people. It's a really important time to have that face-to-face time. I go and spend, invest in relationships, knowing that, when I get back to the office, my office, that's when I do a lot more of my deep work. But that said, if you look at my diary, I spend an awful lot of time investing in relationships and talking to people. Some of the people I have the best and the most strongest relationships with at Pearson, I barely ever see them and barely have ever seen them in the time that I worked here. But we build the relationship because of Teams and collaboration platforms. So
I think that's a lovely note to end on. Do you have what would be your question for the next guest?
Yes. Oh, that was a tough one. So I am going to go with, if you had to pick one, are we here to make work better for employees or better for the business?
Yes, I love that.
And what changes if you answer honestly?
I will make sure that when I ask that, I pause and then, Okay, thank you so much, Kim. As always, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. We are like the Kath and Kim of employee experience. Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know what that is, which most people won't. So that's a really niche Australian comedic show. So that's some homework.
Exactly.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed the episode, then remember to click to subscribe, because there's much more where that came from. And let us know in the comments which bits you've enjoyed and found super insightful. Also, if you would like to be part of the EX conversation and feature on the podcast, then please get in touch.